One day, the beautiful Pocahontas had a troubling dream about a spinning arrow. She went to visit her ancient friend, Grandmother Willow, to ask her advice about the dream. She asked Grandmother Willow, "What is my path?" Grandmother Willow told her about the spirits in the earth, water, and the sky. Listen to the spirits and they will guide you. Pocahontas climbed to the top of the tree's branches. She felt the wind blow around her and saw strange white clouds in the distance. The clouds were the sails of a ship that carried strangers to her land. That afternoon, Pocahontas spotted an adventurous man exploring the forest. For some reason, she was drawn to him. She followed him, and he turned to see who was near. John Smith and Pocahontas stared at each other for several minutes. John had never seen such a mysterious and beautiful woman. Pocahontas was scared, but John assured her he was not going to hurt her. Pocahontas did not understand his language, but rather listened with her heart. She introduced herself. "I'm Pocahontas," she said as they shook hands. They began to talk, and soon they bonded in a way that both had never experienced before. John met her friend the raccoon and hummingbird. Pocahontas guided John through her forest home, showing him the gentleness of a mother bear with her cubs. They listened to gray wolves cry and watched eagles fly to the tops of the sycamore trees. John was realizing that people had a lot to learn, and with Pocahontas as his teacher, he began to hear the voices in the mountains and even see colors in the wind. Pocahontas showed him how no one owned the land. Pocahontas went back to her village and showed her friend Nakuma her new friend John Smith. Nakuma was worried, as she had been warned that settlers were dangerous. Pocahontas made Nakuma promise not to tell anyone, as she left to take John to meet Grandmother Willow. Grandmother Willow advised Pocahontas that John was a good soul. Pocahontas was so very happy, and so was John. John left to return to his camp. When he was gone, Grandmother Willow suggested to Pocahontas that perhaps she had found her path. Back in her village, her friend Nakuma sent out a warrior to find John Smith. When Pocahontas returned to her village, the warrior had taken John prisoner. Pocahontas fell to her knees crying. Nakuma was so sorry for what she had done and told Pocahontas, "I am so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing." Pocahontas visited John in the prisoner's teepee. John told Pocahontas, "I would rather die tomorrow than live 100 years without knowing you." Pocahontas needed some help, and she went to visit Grandmother Willow. As she was walking, her raccoon friend gave her a compass he had snuck from John's bag earlier. The compass's arrow was spinning around. "My dream," said Pocahontas. She knew she must return to save John from the warriors. She protected him but he had already been wounded. Heavy-hearted, they both knew he must return home to survive. "We will always be in each other's hearts," they agreed, as they shared a tender kiss goodbye. As Pocahontas watched his ship sail away, the wind touched them both once again. The end. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, a lovely princess was born. The king and queen named their daughter Aurora. They invited everyone in the kingdom to the palace to celebrate her birth. Everyone except for the evil fairy Maleficent. The wicked fairy was so mad about not being invited that she snuck in anyway, in a flash of lightning, and she put a curse on beautiful Princess Aurora. Before the sun sets on her 16th birthday, she will prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die. Then, Maleficent, in a flash of thunder, disappeared. Luckily, 3 good fairies were at the party, and they softened the curse with a prophecy that said, "If this will happen, you will only sleep, not die. Your sleep will be ended when your true love gives you a kiss." The 3 fairies disguised themselves as peasant women and agreed to raise Aurora in the woods to keep her identity a secret until the night of her 16th birthday. The years passed and Princess Aurora grew into a lovely girl. She only knew the 3 women as her aunts, not as fairies, and they called her Briar Rose. The evil fairy Maleficent was always looking for her, but never could find her. Briar Rose always dreamed of meeting a handsome young man and falling in love. Then, on the day of her 16th birthday, a prince was riding through the woods. The prince heard Briar Rose singing. He asked her to dance, and before they knew it, they had fallen in love. Briar Rose had no idea he was a prince from a nearby kingdom, and the prince had no idea that she was really a princess. The 3 aunts were busy baking Briar Rose's 16th birthday cake. Briar Rose returned to the cottage and told her aunts about the stranger she had met and danced with. The aunts told Briar Rose her real name was Princess Aurora, and she would be returning to the castle that evening. The 3 fairies brought Princess Aurora home to her eagerly awaiting family. Everyone thought the princess had escaped Maleficent's evil curse. But no one knew Maleficent was hiding upstairs. As soon as Maleficent saw Aurora alone, she put her in a trance and led her into a room with a gleaming spinning wheel. "Touch the spindle, touch it," said Maleficent. Princess Aurora obeyed. She pricked her finger and fell to the floor. The 3 fairies found the sleeping princess and were heartbroken. They must now find the handsome stranger the princess had met in the woods. The fairies found the prince, and when he heard the news, he raced towards Princess Aurora's castle. Maleficent was waiting to stop the prince, but she was no match for the prince, and he made his way to the peaceful, beautiful, sleeping Princess Aurora. He knelt by her side and gently kissed her. Slowly, Princess Aurora opened her eyes. She smiled when she saw the face of the handsome stranger from the forest. He was her true love. Aurora sat up and took his hand. The prince asked Aurora to be his bride. "Yes, of course," replied Princess Aurora. They would live in his grand castle, close to her parents and her fairy aunts. Princess Aurora and the prince lived happily ever after. A long time ago, Mr. and Mrs. Darling lived in London, England, with their children, Wendy, Michael, John, and their sweet dog, Nana. Wendy was always telling her brothers stories about a magical place called Neverland, where a magical boy named Peter Pan lived. No one ever grew old in Neverland. It was full of mermaids, Indians, fairies, and some wicked pirates, too. One night, as Wendy told her brothers a bedtime tale of Neverland, magically, Peter Pan and a magic fairy appeared. Peter Pan wanted Wendy to come with him back to Neverland and never grow old. She agreed, as long as her two brothers could come too. The magic fairy sprinkled her fairy dust to help them fly. And soon, Peter Pan had taught Wendy, Michael, and John how to fly. Back in Neverland, Captain Hook was searching for Peter Pan. He was going to capture him once and for all. Peter Pan took Wendy to the Mermaid Lagoon, while Michael and John went off exploring with Peter Pan's friends, the Lost Boys. In the meantime, Captain Hook had taken Tiger Lily, Peter Pan's friend, prisoner. The captain demanded that Tiger Lily tell him where Peter Pan's secret hiding place is. Mr. Shmee, Captain Hook's helper, was a bad person, and he helped Captain Hook put Tiger Lily in danger. All of a sudden, Peter Pan flew in and rescued Tiger Lily from Mr. Shmee and Captain Hook. He rescued her just in time. Captain Hook had another plan. Mr. Shmee would find the magical fairy, and she would help them find Peter Pan's secret hiding spot. Mr. Shmee found the fairy, and she was willing to help because she had become jealous of Wendy. And Captain Hook promised to leave Neverland and kidnap Wendy to take her with him. Because of the promise, the fairy showed Mr. Shmee and Captain Hook on a map where Peter Pan's secret hideout was. Immediately, Captain Hook said, "Thank you, nice fairy," and then locked her up in a cage. The captain and his crew found the secret hideout and captured everyone but Peter Pan. Captain Hook lowered a bomb into the hideout to blast away Peter Pan. But meanwhile, the fairy had escaped to warn Peter Pan about the bomb. The bomb went off, but Peter Pan and the fairy escaped. But Captain Hook had no idea about that. Happy with his prisoners, Captain Hook loaded them on his ship. He gave them all only two choices. "Become pirates or walk the plank," said Captain Hook. Wendy bravely said, "We will never join you," as she slowly walked onto the plank. She stepped off the end and vanished into thin air without even a splash. Michael and John looked on in fear. All of a sudden, they all heard Peter Pan's voice. He had saved Wendy by catching her before she splashed into the water. A great battle started between Peter Pan and Captain Hook. Peter Pan won the battle and threw Captain Hook overboard. The ship was now Peter Pan's. Peter ordered his crew to sail the ship to London to take Wendy, John, and Michael back home. Peter Pan knew Wendy and her brothers had to return home. Wendy and her brothers were so happy to be returning home to London. The ship reached Mr. and Mrs. Darling's home and dropped off Wendy, Michael, and John. Peter Pan and his friends were not ready to grow up just yet, so they turned the ship around to sail back to Neverland, with Peter Pan and the fairy too. Wendy and her brothers waved goodbye from their window as Peter Pan and his ship sailed out of sight towards Neverland. Wendy knew in her heart she must start to grow up soon. But no matter how old she got, she would never forget her wonderful adventures in Neverland with Peter Pan and all of his amazing friends. Once upon a time, a lovely mermaid named Ariel rescued a drowning prince from a shipwreck. Ariel's father had forbade her to swim to the surface, but she had to save the prince. Ariel wanted to be part of the human world so badly. Somehow she would find a way. As she touched the prince's face, she wished with all her heart that she could stay on the beach and dance with this man of her dreams. As the prince lay unconscious, she sang to him. "What would I do to see you smiling at me?" she sang. Her father's trusted friend tried to convince Ariel that being under the sea was her home, and she would be much happier living her life there instead of the human world. The Sea King had asked his friend to keep an eye on his daughter. But despite all the king's friend's efforts, he could not convince her because she was in love with the prince. The fish, her only best friend, was the only one who understood her. Her fish friend surprised Ariel with a statue of the prince that had sunk with the shipwreck. "Oh, thank you so much, my friend," Ariel said. "The statue looks exactly like him." Just then, her father, the Sea King, found Ariel in her secret grotto with her collection of things from the world above the sea. He destroyed all of her treasures in an attempt to protect her from the dangers of the human world. Ariel was so upset.
Oh no.
She sought out the help of the Sea Witch. The Sea Witch made a deal with Ariel. In exchange for the mermaid's voice, the witch would transform Ariel's mermaid tail into legs. The Sea Witch told Ariel she would remain human only if she received a kiss of true love before the sunset on the third day. As Ariel wiggled her newly found toes, the Sea King's trusted friend knew he had to tell the king. But he knew Ariel would be so sad as a mermaid. The king's friend agreed to help Ariel find the prince. Ariel's seagull friend helped her find a dress, and it wasn't long before the prince arrived. "You are the one!" he exclaimed. "The one I have been searching for!" Ariel nodded but could not speak. "But the girl who rescued me had the most beautiful voice," said the prince. "Perhaps you are not the girl I have been searching for." Still, the prince helped her to the castle, and they had dinner that night. Ariel made the prince laugh for the first time in weeks. He showed her around his kingdom the next day and was enchanted by her enthusiasm for everything, from horses to puppet shows. The prince thoroughly enjoyed Ariel, and that night they went for a quiet, romantic boat ride. As the prince leaned in to kiss Ariel, the sea witch made her pet eels tip the boat. Then the sea witch hypnotized the prince and transformed herself, pretending to be his mysterious dream girl. She arranged a wedding right away to make sure all of Ariel's plans would fail. Ariel's seagull bird friend gathered all of her ocean friends to help Ariel defeat the sea witch's evil plans. Her friends fought the sea witch and won, and Ariel's voice was restored. And the spell on the prince was broken. He realized Ariel was his true love, but it was too late, and Ariel was a mermaid again. The evil sea witch dragged Ariel back into the sea. But the strong prince would not lose his true love again, and he fought and destroyed the evil sea witch. The Sea King and his trusted friend watched. And the Sea King could see how much his daughter loved the prince. So he granted her wish to marry the prince. All of Ariel's great sea friends applauded as the prince and Ariel were married, and they lived happily ever after.